want to welcome you this evening to the event with Marsha Coleman-Adebayo. We're pleased to have her and pleased to have a number of organizations local to DC who will also be making short presentations as well. I want to thank our co-sponsors this evening, the NAACP of Montgomery County, Trans-Africa Forum, who's always a great partner for us, the National Whistleblower Center, the No Fear Coalition, the Alliance for Justice in the Workplace, and the USDA Minority Committee. And I want to thank all of you for coming out. This evening, Marsha Coleman-Adebayo will be introduced by civil rights activist, legend, and leader, the Reverend Walter E. Fauntleroy. So I'm sorry, we're going to do the film first before we do the introduction, okay?
New use in the renewable energy field that is getting investors' attention, with Discover magazine calling vanadium the element that could change the world.
The drive for renewable energy has created a rush for development of efficient energy storage devices, a new generation of batteries, essentially. My next guest company produces a key element for one type of battery, the metal vanadium.
And what's very enticing is also the possibility that we'll see vanadium used in green technologies for the storage of solar power and wind power.
And it's a company that provides multi-megawatt energy storage solutions using, and I have no idea what this is, vanadium redox fuel cells. That's one of the coolest things I've ever said out loud.
My husband, Simon B.S. Boy Matli, I started alwala.
That you get sick.
Nala ka mafatla le maoto le mala. Then ka bablella ka baraka la itshuru ke letsatsi la mmala ke ya le tla fitla.
That one day that will
So 35 sa December mna mohula a robala.
December.
The end ya monaka.
That was end of my husband.
The problem with me at Vametco was that they used to burn the vanadium to fuse it. So when working there, you could see suspended vanadium particles in the air, which we used to inhale. There's a certain chemical, they call it MVO. The MVO can penetrate the skin, like the old man said. After washing, when you wear your clothes and you start sweating, the sweat would come out with the black powder. And when you come at home, you look at your clothes, you could see the blackness of that powder.
Did you have any bleeding?
Yes, sometimes when I went to the toilet to urinate, sometimes the urine would come, it is red.
I was a machine operator. There was a machine there they called crawling machine, taking samples down there at the mine. Yeah, and I started realizing that my tongue used to change during the night.
Like green?
Yeah, my tongue used to change. I couldn't breathe during the night. My feet used to burn like fire. And I started complaining when times goes by that I'm not well, so I'd start giving sick notes and so on. They called me to the meeting. They said, look, the company couldn't afford you because you can't do the job properly. And they dismissed me in 1990. I didn't know, because when I get to Vametco, I was just healthy. I was just fine. Took me to X-ray, everything, I was healthy.
So you saw your friends and neighbors dying. Did you believe that they were dying because they worked at Vametco?
ya gobane ntse ke bereka le bona ikutlwa ka nna ka mokgwa nkirileng ga gona ntho se tse ka iragale le mmereko nka se bereke saka fela ko tlhokofala.
The job, I cannot job anymore now because I've got no power, I've got no strength, and all what I'm waiting is death.
I was an EPA employee that discovered that a community in South Africa had been poisoned by a U.S. multinational corporation. And when I reported it, literally the ceiling fell down on my head. My supervisors told me to shut up and not to talk about it. I know that it takes a lot of courage to come out and to talk about your experiences. We also have a lot of repression in the United States, and when you speak out, the state also oftentimes will punish you for speaking out.
Marsha Coleman-Adebayo has been a senior analyst at the EPA for 10 years, and she claims it has been a decade of discrimination.
I was an intruder in their world. I could participate in high-level staff meetings, I was told, only because my colleagues regarded me as an honorary white man. And I must admit, I was so stunned. I remember hearing the laughter from around the table.
She and other employees took their case to Congress and took on EPA Chief Carol Browner.
Perhaps people behaved poorly, perhaps they had ulterior motives. It's the political season.
Browner told us she was unaware of any complaints.
We've more than doubled the number of minorities in our top ranks.
What difference does it make if you bring 2 million of us to this agency and we're all living in hell?
Today I join with the city of Gaithersburg in honoring one person, Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo, a leader in the struggle for civil rights and worker protection.
While these attacks were meant to break my spirit, I decided instead to wage a struggle for human dignity and integrity.
Dr. Coleman-Adebayo won a historic lawsuit in the year 2000 against a federal agency based on racial, sexual discrimination, and a hostile work environment.
My name is Marsha Coleman-Adebayo, and I thank God for this day.
As a result of this victory and her subsequent testimony before the United States Congress, the Notification of Federal Employees Anti-Discrimination and Retaliation Act, also known as the No Fear Act, was passed by Congress and signed into law. After passage of this important legislation, Dr. Coleman-Adebayo formed the No Fear Coalition, a group of civil rights and whistleblower organizations dedicated to working for increased legislative protections for those federal employees who speak out to protect the public good.
Marsha eventually won her court case. It sounds a lot like the Aaron Brockovich movie, and actually, Marsha's story could also make it to the big screen. Actor Danny Glover is reportedly preparing a movie based on her story.
I've gotten to know Marsha because we're working on a film on her courageous fight for justice. It was a victory for not only Marsha, but it was a victory for women, all human beings who stand up for justice, who stand up and say no, who stand up and be counted.
Waves crashing all around me, stormy waters trying to drown me. Take me under, far away from my home. No refuge as far as I can see. Can't swim to safety. I'm afloat on the unknown, and I'm no longer blind. I can see just fine. I know where I'm going and what I have to do. Even though it's like poison, they will never silence me, 'cause I have no fear as long as the truth is here. crumble into dust, and nameless ones do what they must, even if it means dying to live, yeah. One voice raised in protest, ooh, can only lay to rest greed and lies and deception. Find your strength within. Fight on and on, give in. Long as God is with you, no one can stand against you.
What else can I say that this piece did not say for me? I am just tremendously proud of Marsha Coleman-Adebayo and her work. And actually, her struggle is what my film company is all about. I like to make movies about people with incredible integrity, people who have real courage, people who will stand in the face of so much adversity and odds. She's my Sheba, my Wonder Woman, my Rosa Parks for this generation. And I'm just so proud to know her and be connected to her. We're doing a film, a documentary film on Marsha, not only because of Marsha herself, who she is a great and a tremendous person, but we need to tell this story to our kith and our kin, our people who need to know that it is important to stand up. You know, laws are nothing but words on paper. But people to actually stand up and enforce them and actually make sure that everybody adheres to the law is what's going to keep this country together. Am I right? Absolutely. All right. I want to acknowledge that this film is being, right now, sponsored by a man who right over there, his name is Sonny B. Sutherland from the People's Advocacy Group. He stepped up in a large way. And he's also worked with the Coalition of Civil Rights, and he brought me down here. But I also want to compel each and every one of you that you can be active participants by not only purchasing a book. Purchase 2 books, maybe, even 3. Put one in, I mean, Christmas is coming, right? And Kwanzaa and all the holidays. Make this book a gift to your library, in your school, or, you know, in your church or in your community organization. Also, go to the website and actually you can support this film being done and made, because we know there's a lot of mind poison out there, am I right? There's a lot of foolishness out there, and it's really slick. It's done in high definition and slow motion and all that other stuff, really cool music. But stories like this, if we want these stories to be told, we're going to have to support these kinds of stories being told. And independent filmmakers like myself, we rely on your understanding of this and supporting us to get this done. So, you know, you can go to the website. I'm not going to take up too much more time because I really think the piece, and you can actually, it was like blurry here. It's out of focus. I was really annoyed, you know, as a filmmaker and a perfectionist that I am. But you can go to www.bwmovingimages.com and go also to YouTube to see this short and much clearer perspective. I'm not going to say any more, but right now I'm going to introduce to you the woman who this is about, or Reverend Fauntleroy? Oh, okay. Oh, I get to introduce the Reverend Fauntleroy. Yes. This is going on my bio tomorrow. He also introduced Reverend Fauntleroy at an event because we all know his story. He really needs no introduction. He is just an incredible person. He recognized the importance of the struggle that Marsha had. He joined in right away at the beginning, and he stayed strong, and he continues to support her. Reverend Fauntleroy. Give it up.
Thank you so very much. Whenever I think of Marsha Coleman-Adebayo, I think of 2 other human beings who have meant so much to me in my personal life. I think of Martin Luther King Jr. and what he said on April the 3rd, 1968, the night before he was to be assassinated. He said, "I'm not fearing any man. I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I'll not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land." And I think of something that Rosa Parks did on December the 2nd, 1955. On the evening of April 3rd, Dr. King said, "For our time and for all time, I'm not fearing any man." And on the evening, late afternoon of December 2nd, 1955, Rosa Parks did something. She refused to give up her seat. And quite frankly, their work is summarized in what you're about to see and hear from Marsha Coleman-Adebayo for the 21st century. I know that Martin would be thrilled to be here tonight because I knew the man. I had the unique privilege of being his personal representative to the Presidents of the United States, Johnson and Kennedy, to the leadership of the U.S. House and Senate in the decade of the 60s, and to the cabinet-level agency heads that had relevance to our struggle, including J. Edgar Hoover. And I know what he felt and what he believed when he said, "I am not fearing any man." He was a man with no fear, and a man who believed that it is the responsibility of people of conscience not to cooperate with evil. And Marsha, when I see you and when I know this story that you're about to tell, I cannot help but remember Rosa Parks, who did something that we need to do in the 21st century. I think I can summarize what these three persons mean to me by reading for you a poem that is in this book. And I want you to read it over and over again. And the book represents the essence of the marvelous and courageous and deeply horrifying deeds that Marsha Coleman-Adebayo uncovered and did something about. The words are to a poem called "Something Deeper Than Words." You're about to hear something deeper than words. It just says this: something happens when a person stands up one day and says, "I refuse." Often it is a first, like Rosa Parks. I refuse to give up my seat. I refuse to settle for this. I refuse to look the other way. It is beyond the day-to-day trends or job descriptions. I refuse. It is something deeper than words, beyond bullets, and older than anything you've ever known, and returns to us in that moment when we say, "I refuse." Something comes to life in our refusal. And that refusal becomes the singular creed we must obey. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the Rosa Parks of the 21st century to challenge us to refuse to cooperate with evil. Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo.
Good evening. Wow, this is such an amazing evening, and there's my speech right on the floor. But that's okay. Reverend Fauntleroy, you just took my breath away. Thank you. Coming from you, those words mean so much to me. I'd like just to thank everyone for coming. I am just overwhelmed with your response when we placed the call to come and let's talk about justice. Let's come, let's talk about justice. I'd like to start by just thanking some people who are very important to me. First and foremost is my husband, Segun Adebayo. You know, they say behind every great man is a good woman. Behind every woman is a great man, and that's my husband. And I'd like to thank all the organizations that spend so much time getting all of you out here. Barnard in Washington, Trans-Africa, help me, Segun, National Whistleblower Center, oh, thank you very much. Coalition for Change, Blacks in Government, MISC, Project on Government Oversight, Nigerian Association, Igbaroke Society, Christ School Society. You see, it takes a village to do this. So thank you so much. And all of my friends here, if I started going person by person, we'd be here all night long. So just please know how much I love each and every one of you. And we've been in the struggle for a very long time together. So we know each other and we trust each other. And we're so grateful to have each other in our lives. So thank you all for coming out. They came to me complaining of green tongues. They told me about bleeding from every orifice. Their husbands could no longer perform. The sheet on his side of the bed would be black in the morning from whatever it was that oozed from his pores while he tried to sleep. Some had only photographs of their husbands who had died at the age of 50 but had looked like 95. There were reports of many dead and more dying. The company would not help. The company would not even let them see their own x-rays. It was an American company. So they had come to me. For them, I was America. I worked for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And America had sent me to them in joy and celebration at the end of apartheid. America had come to help and to help the new government succeed. I decided to write this book for 3 reasons. One is because I needed to fulfill a promise to the people of Brits, South Africa. You could see a lot of the people in the film that we just saw. I promised them, if you tell me your story, I will tell the world. And they sat down and they shared their most intimate details with me. And one of the major joys that I'm looking forward to now is going back to South Africa and putting this book in their hands and saying, I have told the world about your story. I also needed to challenge this culture of fear in the federal government. You see, the federal government is held together by this insane web of fear. Fear of performance evaluations, fear of your supervisor, fear that someone's going to stab you in the back, fear of this, fear of this. But the mother of all fear is fear of losing your job. And I decided, I'm going to put a crack in this hole. I'm going to say, you know what, we're no longer going to be fearful of the federal government. We're going to stand up and we're going to speak truth to power. That's what we have to do. And I wanted to tell this story. I wanted to tell our story of the passage of the first civil rights and whistleblower law of the 21st century. I wanted to talk about Tanya Ward Jordan. I wanted to talk about Joyce Meganson. I wanted to talk about Dwight Welch. I wanted to talk about Blair Hayes. I wanted people to understand that these are people just like us. They're in the audience today, and you're going to hear from them later. But I wanted you to understand how courageous, how beautiful these people were. They came together. They decided, you know what? You want to take my job? You can have it. You want to take my house? You can have it. But one thing you can't take my dignity. That's not for sale. Joe Madison, a TV personality, radio person in our area, has a saying that I just love to hear him on the radio. And he says, when there's some issue that's very complex and everyone is sort of wringing their hands about it, Joe will say, now what are you going to do about it? So that's my challenge tonight, is for all of us, because these are not easy issues, but what we all have to confront at some point, just as Joyce and Tanya and Blair all had to decide, what are we going to do about it? I joined the EPA in 1990 as a senior policy analyst, and I found out very quickly that this was a workplace that was, of course, full of fear. And the question that I had to deal with at that time was how I was going to respond to all the stimulation I was getting of everybody wringing their hands and saying, I can't do this, I can't say this, my supervisor might hear about this, different things. But as my career went on, I was asked if I would take on a very challenging position. Nelson Mandela had just become president. And the United States government had decided that it wanted to work with the new South African government in a very constructive way. So it organized with South Africa the U.S. South Africa Binational Commission. It was called the Gore and Becky Commission. This is 1996. And they asked me if I would be willing to be the executive secretary for the Gore and Becky Commission. And at first I had reservations because they had mistreated me on something else, but eventually I said, I was an anti-apartheid activist. I marched in front of the South African embassy for a long time. And so now I had the opportunity to actually to do something for the government. And I was actually quite pleased to do that. But not long after I assumed this position, Jacob Ungukani, who you saw in the film, who was a COSATU union member and an environmental activist, came to me in my official capacity representing the United States government, representing EPA, and told me about a community about 2 hours from Pretoria, it's called Brits, that was suffering from something called vanadium pentoxide poisoning. He went on to tell me that when these miners are exposed to vanadium pentoxide, they bleed from every orifice, that they defecate blood, they urinate blood, and then their tongues turn a bright green. I went to my supervisor, and I spoke to my supervisor, and I said, I'm hearing reports from South Africa that there's a community that's being poisoned by a U.S. multinational corporation. We need to do something about that. And she said to me, She looked at me and she said, "Shut up." I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Shut up." And then she said, "Marsha, my goodness, I mean, come on, you just got a brand new, big new office. I mean, what are you, come on, look, spend your time decorating your office." So I've just told my supervisor that a community in South Africa is possibly dying at the hands of a U.S. multinational, and her response is, "You need to have a Martha Stewart moment." You know, I wasn't feeling like Martha Stewart. I was feeling like with Reverend Farntworth, I was feeling like I was having a Rosa Parks moment. Because someone had just told me to shut up when I told them that someone was dying. That was not a part of who I am. And so that began in many ways to be the beginning of the end of my relationship at the EPA. Because I understood that they considered some people more human than other people. You see, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. The Civil Rights Movement and the Motown Revolution was a part of my backdrop. When I was a really good girl, my mother would take me to Reverend Franklin's church so I could hear Aretha sing in the choir. My grandmother on my father's side was a member of the Marcus Garvey movement. But she was also, more importantly, a Klan fighter in her small southern town. So my grandmother had a shotgun by her front door. And when I would ask my grandmother, "Why do you have a shotgun by your front door?" she would say, "If any of those pointy-head people try to come into my house, this will be the last house they'll ever come into." And by the way, my grandmother meant it. My mother took on the Detroit school system when they tried to track me into special education. And I remember her taking me by the hand one day, and instead of being able to go to my classroom, she took me to the principal's office and she said, "Sit down." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "I got to talk to your principal." And then I started hearing things after she got into the office falling off the wall and loud voices. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to come back to this school again." I was so embarrassed. And then the principal came out and said, "Your mother has made me understand that perhaps you don't belong in special education. I think you need to be in the college prep program." No, maybe the honors program. So within 1 hour, I went from special education to college prep. So the women in my life had a very clear moral compass. So when they asked me to look the other way, when someone told me about people dying in South Africa, that was simply not a part of my DNA. Now, one of the things that I worked on was when after my supervisor had told me that she wasn't going to cooperate, I worked very hard within the Gorham-Becky structure to get a resolution passed so that we could send an independent team of scientists to South Africa to investigate vanadium poisoning. What I found out was that everything I tried to do was basically blocked. It was absolutely every travel order. Kathy Washburn is here. She knows about this incredible history that I'm telling. They would not let me travel to South Africa. They would not allow me to pull together this independent team to assess vanadium poisoning. In fact, it went so far that when I realized that they were blocking me in every single term, I said, "At least send a doctor to South Africa. Let a doctor go there and see if there's any truth to what we're hearing." So when I started filling out the travel forms for the doctor to go to South Africa, I just politely said, "What branch of medicine are you in?" Just curious. He said, "I'm a veterinarian." So perhaps this is a good place to talk about the revolving door between industry and government. Because inside the federal government, there's this revolving door of all the businessmen, like the Wall Street types, who come in and out of the government, right? And what they do is they pick up the contacts, and then they go back into the private sector again. But while they're in the government, they're still really a part of the private sector.
So what they're doing is actually conducting, and they're actually laying the groundwork for going back into the private sector. So for example, my boss at EPA was a very high official in Mobile. He had been head of the legal department in Tokyo, in Kinshasa, and in Lagos. So that when I'm telling him about an extractive industry in South Africa, you can imagine he wasn't particularly sympathetic. I later found out during the trial, the federal court trial that I was involved in, that in fact EPA, while I was talking to Mandela's representatives, there was a white colleague of mine who was in fact talking to the Afrikaners. And we had two separate conversations going on. So while I'm talking to Nelson Mandela's people and we're trying to figure out how we're going to provide clean air and clean water and solid waste to people, they've got people behind me talking about how they're going to make money and how they're going to bring U.S. businesses into South Africa. And believe me, vanadium is big business. Look around the room. Your forks, your knives, the TV camera, the microphone that I'm speaking through, it all has vanadium in it. When I first asked my husband, who's an aeronautical engineer, to go out and do research for me about what this chemical was, metal was, he came back and he said, "Sweetie, I think you've touched a third rail here." So crimes against humanity are occurring in Brits, South Africa. And the unemployment rate is about 50 to 60%. So people have to choose between either eating or working in a mine in South Africa. So this is a very, very, very serious thing. I was removed from the position because I refused to tell the public lies about what we were doing in South Africa. When people would call and say, "What are we doing in South Africa?" I was ordered to say, "Oh, we're doing great things in South Africa. We're helping a high school, or we're doing this." And I said, no, I'm not telling any of that lies. The public pays my salary. I'm going to tell the public the truth. And they kept saying, "Well, whose team do you think you're on?" And I kept saying, "I'm on the people's team." That's what I signed up for when I came to EPA. So, and also there was a question of falsifying documents and such things. And so once the agency removed me, I just had to know. I literally just had to know what was happening in South Africa. I couldn't have lived with myself if I hadn't found out. And so first we organized a team of medical doctors, and we went to South Africa on our own dime, and we started an epidemiological study, just interviewing people about their symptoms. And a lot of that is what you've seen on the screen today. And then I took a second team to South Africa through my alma mater, Barnard College, 2 professors and 4 students. And we conducted another study in South Africa. So, but I'd like to now sort of focus on what really, in many ways, sent me over the top at EPA. Because it was bad enough that the vanadium victims were not that there was no investigation of vanadium poisoning, but it actually got worse. There was a woman that I met as a part of my duties, a very, very, very brave woman. She had been victimized during apartheid. She had been tortured during apartheid. Her son decided to go off and join a training camp in Angola. And at the end of apartheid, when everyone was celebrating, this lady was actually going from hospital to hospital, morgue to morgue, trying to find her son. Later finding out that he was dead from an ambush in a training camp. So when I met her, but nevertheless, when you met her, she was full of life. Her name was Sitz Betsy. You saw a picture of her on the screen. And when I met her, she was asking, well, how can the United States help me? Because she had already started to organize an orphanage, because she decided the way she would channel her grief was to provide a place for children who had lost their parents during the revolution. And that's what really kept her going. So she filed all the necessary papers, and she asked us for $30,000, which, as you know, is a pittance. And we approved her grant. And she was happy. I remember calling her in the Transkei and listening to her hoop and holler and praise God because we were going to give her $30,000. But as I started pressing more and more for Sis Betsy's orphanage and for an investigation, the sheet started coming off of the EPA. Because what they really wanted was a private sector initiative. The humanitarian issue was just window dressing. But they had someone there who wouldn't let this humanitarian issue go. So one day I was called into the office and I was told that they were not going to give the grant to Sis Betsy. I literally almost got on my knees and begged them because I knew that she didn't have any money. I knew that she had no money. And she had already told me that if anything went wrong, she'd have to close the doors to her orphanage. And I'll pick up the reading from there. This is what happened. It was with a lump in my throat and a heavy stone on my soul that I listened to the circuits connecting the phone from Bethesda to Transkei, South Africa, and heard the low shrill of the ringing at the other end. I was half hoping Betsy was not there when she picked up. Hello? Oh, hi, is this Betsy? This is Marsha. Marsha, so wonderful to hear you. Sis Betsy, I won't beat around the bush. I have terrible news. The agency has decided not to fund your community center. I'm so sorry. I could hear the receiver rattling on the floor. Betsy was shrieking in the background. Oh my God, what am I going to do? The phone felt heavy in my hand like one of those old irons that had to be heated in the oven. It fell into the cradle like it was made of steel. I felt faint, my knees giving out. I slid to the floor with my back against the wall, collapsing my legs, going in opposite directions. I was reduced to a knot of sobbing and tears. Betsy's voice was still in the air. It was the wail of anyone who has ever been betrayed. For the first time in my life, I knew a traitor's loneliness. After all of my work, the net result was damage. Damage to those I had sought to help. I could see the results that awaited them. I could see the children's eyes darken and drain of light. I could see Sis Betsy collapse in a heap after the last of her children slid down the drain of South Africa's despair. And I could feel her hatred of me. This was the threshold. This the place we all reach some impossible Wednesday, when the words of deceit find their way out of our own mouths, formed by our own lips. Whatever foul fate awaited Sis Betsy and her children, whatever afflictions began to throb in the blood cells of the miners, however many mosquitoes rubbed their hind legs together in anticipation in Alexandria, my life in America, in the government, at grade level GS-15, with 7 floating holidays and acute vacations, would be just fine. All I needed to do was stop being me. That's all that is required of any who are asked to forget their connection to their fellow human beings. It comes in many shapes, it comes in various ways, but it comes. In my case, it came with appointments to prestigious positions. It came with letters of commendation from the White House. It came with a promise to be a part of the inevitable change for the betterment of mankind. But it also came with a catch, always a catch. We couldn't do it on this project because the president might object. We couldn't do it on that project because of the effect it would have on our allies. We couldn't do it on the other thing because. Next commission, next session, next term. We all had the look, we all had the feel. We all knew the talk. Positive, accentuate the affirmatives. Let me get back to you on that. When a project was done, the paperwork would be filed, the trophies awarded, the press spun. Yet at the end of those very long public service days, whether any of us knew it, and even when we knew, we almost never acknowledged it. The only thing we accomplished was another layer of pretense, another layer of self-hate. After seeing how you operate, nah. After Jacob Ngukani, no. After Sis Betsy, always no. Washington Post. Yes, I need to speak to a senior editor in the Washington Bureau. I was transferred to another line. This is the Washington desk. Hello. My name is Marsha Coleman-Adebayo. I am a senior policy analyst at the Environmental Protection Agency. I have reason to believe the EPA is covering up crimes that are being committed by an American multinational corporation against the people of South Africa. There were so many of us having these experiences in the federal government. And one of the true pleasures of my life was when I met Reverend Walter Fauntleroy, who was such a warrior and who was able to give us direction, to tell us about the footprints that had been left behind by the soldiers. And then I met Tanya, and I met Blair, and I met Dwight, and I started meeting Altheria and Dennis, and this wonderful group of people. And at some point we came together and we said, you know, we're stronger, we're more powerful when we're together. And we organized something that was called the No Fear Coalition. And believe me, this coalition was feared. Throughout the federal government, people started whispering about this No Fear Coalition because we weren't beholden to anybody. We weren't a part of the Democratic Party. We weren't a part of the Republican Party. In fact, I remember one time when Senator Lieberman was called the NAACP because we had had an action against Senator Lieberman. And he called the NAACP and he said, "Isn't there anything you can do about this group?" And supposedly Lieberman said to them, "No, I'm sorry, but..." No, the NAACP said to them, "Sorry, I'm sorry, they don't really belong to us. They're no fear." Anyway, let me just take you back and just say that I filed a complaint against the EPA. I won that complaint. Actually, I won the largest lawsuit ever against the EPA on the basis of race, color, sex. My attorney, David Shapiro, that you'll hear from in a few minutes, was the brilliant mastermind behind that trial. And it was a very, very exciting time. We started, after the trial, we went to congressional hearings, and at that point, Congress decided that they had heard enough and decided to introduce the Notification of Federal Employees Anti-Discrimination and Retaliation Act. And it was passed May 15, 2002. But I must tell you, this was a hard-won battle. We wore out shoes on Capitol Hill. We were together, I think, every single day for 2 years, marching and fighting. We sustained battle losses, like all great movements, like Patricia Lawson, one of my colleagues who actually died at her desk at EPA. But we decided that nothing was going to stop us. Nothing was going to stop us. We were on mission, and that nothing would stop us. We were fighting for our children. And that's one of the most powerful elixirs ever, is when you fight for the next generation. So I just would like to again thank everyone for coming. Paul Ruffins, who was so wonderful. Kevin Behrens, he's here somewhere, a brilliant writer. Thank you all so much for coming. And I would just ask you to please, let's move together. Let's continue the fight. This is a fight that we literally cannot lose. We must free the federal government from the clutches of these anti-democratic forces that control the government. Thank you.
Is if I bring the microphone to you. So if you wanted to say a few short words, members of the No Fear Coalition. Yep. Sorry, I just wanted to also acknowledge my daughter who's here, Sade. Hola, Sade. May Justice Coleman-Adebayo.
and also my son, Sheye Aluko, and I believe Tony Aluko is here. And I have nieces and nephews here. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. So members of the No Fear Coalition who wanted to say a few words, thank you. I can come to you, it's fine.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I want to recognize again Reverend Fauntroy, who's been with us. I thank you so much. And Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo asked me to say a few words, and I'm not one of many words, but I have two. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marsha, for taking a stand. And Marsha gave you a glimpse of the fear that's inside the federal government, the hostile culture that each of us face, just to stand up and do the right thing as civil servants. All along the way, Marsha said it before I did, she also said thank you to Sagoon, because as Marsha stated, we battled to get this bill passed, and behind her every way was her husband, so standing so dedicatedly. And as a member of the No Fear Coalition, I'm very grateful for that. But I'm going to give the other members of No Fear an opportunity to speak, but I want to say I stood alongside Marsha with regard to actually getting the first legislation passed, No Fear 1. And that was passed to make the federal agencies more accountable. Right now, they're not. You know, there's a petition that I posted on the White House webpage, and that is to mandate accountability. That is, when right now, if a federal public official discriminates or retaliates against the public or even the federal employees, there's no accountability. And I'm asking people to sign in on that petition. You know, interestingly enough, I sent it around to a few of my friends on the email, and they said, but Tanya, isn't discriminating illegal? I said, yes, but there's no consequences. Right now, Marsha, she did a dynamic job. A lot of you who are not a part of the federal government have no idea what it took to get a finding of discrimination. She is to be applauded. She is to be celebrated on this very day. And I'm very proud to be here and to share this moment with you. And in closing, I just want to ask you, I'm a part of No Fear Coalition, but because of all the pain that is that federal workers face when they try to reveal this type of injustice, I started a support group, and it's called the Coalition for Change, Inc., C4C. If you go on our website, it's the coalition, 4change.org. On the news back page, please click that link, because you can click the petition. We need everyone to sign the petition to make managers more accountable, because just last week, Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo and myself stood with the USDA workers, and you saw how quickly they threw poor Shirley Sherrod under the bus, and she did nothing wrong. But let a manager discriminate or retaliate against women, as they did with their women in the Forest Service, who came all the way from California last week, and Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo spoke on that. So we need to hold these people accountable who are doing this injustice, and I thank you, and thank you, Marsha.
Thank you. I'm Blair Hayes. Let me say, Marsha, thank you for having a place for me in the No Fear Coalition. But I think there's a couple of things all of you need to know. The bill didn't just pass. The bill passed without one dissenting vote, Democrat or Republican, in the House and the Senate. That's never happened before. Okay? Also, I think I want you to understand that I don't want to stand here and go through the pain and suffering, and as she said, together every day, and the fact that all of us stood realizing what we had at risk, and we stood and made the fight anyway. But I want you to understand is that we never thought this was going to happen. We didn't do it for this. This is 10 years later. You know, we were satisfied. We knew what we had done. There was going to be no Blair Hayes or no Marsha. Our names are not on the bill. Our name's not on the bill. But if you look behind the cover, we're there. So I want you to know that I'm going to say this for all of us in the coalition, all of us, that we want to thank you for coming out tonight, because this is our first reunion in 10 years. We have never been together since that. And hopefully this is our first reunion, that as this book grows and this movie grows, and this movement goes to another level, that we have more reunions, and the next time we want to be sitting down, and we want to see some of you in this place.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dwight Welch, and I was the president of the Scientists Union at EPA, and Marsha first came to me. She belonged to the other union, but I said, what the heck, they're not doing anything, so I'm going to help you out. I don't really have a whole lot to say, but I'm an entomologist, and one thing I found is when you shine a light on cockroaches, they disperse. And that's exactly what Marsha and the No Fear Coalition have done. And I don't know, the struggle for freedom and true equality goes on long after the years of Reverend Fontroy. We didn't have, dogs and fire hoses and people in Halloween costumes, but the Halloween costumes are still there, they're just in the closet. But lately it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's ExxonMobil or BP, spilled some oil on the road and keep walking forward, but keep sliding back. So I just got to say that I'm inspired by this 99% movement, and I think it's time that all Americans work together and work for the common man.
Hi, I'm David Shapiro, and I'm Marsha's lawyer. Thank you. I just want to say a few things about, if you read the book, you'll see that Marsha had all this struggle over the poisoning in South Africa, and that's what she was about. But the problem is that she ran smack dab into race and sex discrimination at the highest level of EPA. And as I told her then, I said, until you get by that, you'll have no platform. We win this case, and everything's possible. Not likely, but possible with hard work, and that's what the No Fear Coalition that she put together did. But first, you got to win the case. And I just want to say, I'm about civil rights litigation. That's what I do. A lot of people say, oh, the lawyers, they're the ones that do. It's true, it's very tough to do these cases. But the people that really need to be applauded are the people who stand up and go the distance. You have no idea how difficult it is to stand up to your employer, particularly when your employer is not ExxonMobil, not the big law firm Dewey, Cheatham and Howe, but the United States government, which has all the power, all the money. It's their court, all right? Just standing up. And I know, because my clients are in this room, there are lots of people here who did stand up, but you'd be amazed at how difficult that is. And for me, if you read the book, you'll see there's a whole, maybe 100 pages about the trial, and it shows you how tense things were and how difficult they were for Marsha to just get through this and make a difference. And that's true with people like Blair Hayes. It's people who stand up and go the distance that make all the difference in the world, and make everything else, like the No Fear Coalition and the legislation and all of that possible by standing your ground no matter the cost. And for me, those are the heroes. And Marsha Coleman-Adebayo, Blair Hayes, and the others who have stood up for this are the ones that are really to be congratulated. Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Okay, thank you. Look at me. I didn't get one of those. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Marsha, you sign it.